Is much of life just us grieving the fact that we came into this world, contending with what the world looks like and how we believe it ought to be, facing and resenting the wreckage of existence's broken promises? We all want divine intervention. We want to be emancipated. That desire shapes itself differently for people. Religious or not, people project spiritual power onto an object. You want love to save you, or money, fame, powerful concepts that you think will unlock higher levels of existence, or at the very least, severance from this one. And what is that if not some iteration of God? Religious or not, you seek more. And that kind of sums up Rosalia's album, More. Did you like my pretentious intro? Me too. I don't know if it's picking up on camera well, but I have a little makeup look going on to commemorate the Lux moment, because I went to the actual concert for the tour and I had a kind of light shining from my face makeup look, and this is kind of a 5-minute version of it. If it doesn't show well, I'll just show a picture of what it looks like. What was the concert like? It was amazing. I got to hold her hand. I'm laughing because I'm not the kind of person who likes to do that thing where like you touch the celebrity as they're walking through the path, but I don't know, she was like right there and I couldn't stop myself, and her hand was so soft. Sorry, it sounds so parasocial to me, so like I can't believe that I actually did it, but I have no regrets because I got to touch Rosalia and she looked me dead in the eye and it was amazing. I was super jealous though, because if I paid a couple more dollars, I would have been able to be on stage with her. Like the other people that were at the Berghain on the other side got to go on stage for one of the songs. Oh my god, don't get me started. But anyway, the structure of this video, I'm going to start by obviously digging into the album, and I want to clarify it is not the deluxe version, because when I was writing all this stuff down, when I was analyzing the album, the deluxe version hadn't come out yet. I'm going to be going in order of the songs to like be able to properly map out the journey that we see unfold in Lux, and then after that I'm going to touch on the interviews and the visuals and how it kind of informs the general world of Lux. In some of my analysis it might seem like I'm going much deeper than necessary, but honestly, with the scale and the craftsmanship of the Lux album, this is a unique case where I think that reaching far beyond the artist's intention is almost impossible. She put so much thought into the album that even if I'm going beyond what she initially thought when making certain artistic decisions, that is the culture and ethos of the album, like grandiosity, maximalism, depth, and feeling. Plus, even if I am wrong, it just goes to show how certain nuances of her decisions further helped Rosalia be able to communicate the general themes of the album, even if a particular choice doesn't have the specific meaning that I ascribe to it. Like, even if it was just done because it sounds right, for example, I'm looking into why it is that it sounds right. But she went to like a very exclusive, prestigious music school, so I really wouldn't put anything past her. And I know that I mentioned this already in my Media 2025 video, but I'm going to be doing the same thing where I'm not always going to be finishing an idea. Like I said, I'm putting in practice the philosophy of not having to squeeze every thought and every piece of knowledge for everything that it's worth. So, because sometimes just letting ideas flow can be really powerful. And what I mean is basically sometimes I'll be asking questions that I'm not necessarily going to be answering, and like don't be surprised if you see that happening. It's just to be able to introduce like the possibility of something, if that makes sense. But I do encourage you to answer the question in the comments if you do have one, and if you do want to take that as a source to like reflect more on whatever theme or idea I'm talking about. Music-wise, it starts with like a crescendo to set up the tone of waxing and waning throughout the song, and to set up the dichotomy of like God and the earth, which kind of continues throughout the entire album. And her point in this song is to pose a question. Like she says, "Quien pudiera vivir entre los dos," which means who can live between the two, again within that dichotomy of being earthly, being into maybe all the vices that come with being human and existing within humanity, and then also being a woman of God, which Rosalia is, and like engaging in divinity, engaging in her more spiritual side. And kind of music wise, the way that I associated it, there's the waxing and the waning, and to bridge like I know there's a musical term for it, but I forget, like the maximum and then the minimum. There's like the electronic sound versus the like, again, more classical sound with like the violins and stuff. Or not the violins, it's a piano. I'm pretty sure it's a piano. Ooh, why am I forgetting? I've listened to this song 10,000 times. But it's a classical instrument, right? And then there's like the electronic music that comes in. There's like an electronic guitar. And to me, that electronic guitar kind of symbolizes, the earth, the griminess of it, humanity and all of its flaws. And then the classical music being more related to like God and religion. Just because of the association of classical music with church, also just the era of classical music, it was a very religious time for the places that like had classical music. So to me, it was like electronic sound, we're introducing like earthliness, and then classical sound, we're talking about the godliness. So what she's doing here is introducing the theme of humanity in tandem with that of religion and emancipation at the hands of God, like bringing this electronic griminess to that classical music, right? But in Sexo Violencia y Llantas, she kind of seems to be more pitting them against each other a little bit. Like it's hard to figure out how to coexist with both these things because they are in conflict. Again, quien pudiera vivir entre los dos. As she's putting these two things against each other, she's still also delineating how one progresses onto the other. So how you start with like this barbaric kind of Hobbesian society, in the sense of like the philosophical idea that if humans were left alone at our core, we are kind of evil and violent. That's kind of the imagery that she's evoking in Sexo Violencia y Llantas. And even though that is starkly against the prevailing imagery of religion, one still can progress onto the other. One still can kind of coexist with one another, but like also, can it really? And I think the core of it for her really in this song, it's like, how can I love a world so sinful and also love God? How can I reconcile being of the world but also of something divine? And then right then after that, we have Reliquia, where she talks about her love for the world. So this second track is kind of like talking about her attachment and the depth of feeling she has towards the world and her human experiences. And as she's talking about like living, she's essentially also speaking to the feeling of living so fully, or with such an open heart, that with every experience you kind of leave a part of yourself there. Like she's talking about how she left Heels in Milan. I may be mixing them up, but she left Heels in Milan. She left her smile in the UK, those kinds of things. And the song is very upbeat. So we can see that despite Sexo Violencia y Llantas, she is associating joy and happiness with having a deep attachment to humanity and the world. And more on this tone of happiness. Now, I'm kind of rusty when it comes to my music theory, but just from the first page of the score of Reliquia, which I found on MuseScore for the piano, the song is in E Phrygian, and so it has this sentiment of like being on the precipice of something, being on the verge of something, like a journey that, where you're almost there kind of thing. So it has this sort of naivete, a sort of upbeatness, and a sort of kind of suspense, which I think was really an interesting choice for like the tone of it. She says, pero mi corazón nunca ha sido mío, yo siempre lo doy, coge un trozo de mí, quédatelo pa cuando no esté, which is like, basically, it's gonna be a really rough translation, but basically she's saying that like her heart isn't really hers, and and as she's having these experiences, like she's kind of giving it out to the world, and it is something that's meant to be given, and you should like keep it, like basically. And this is gonna kind of go into the last song of the album, which is Magnolia, and also Memoria, the two last songs. And she's like, keep it, because when I'm gone, this is what's left of me. It's all these experiences and the parts of my selfhood that I've kind of nested in them. And then after that, there's Divinize, which goes straight into religion. And Divinize is very metaphorically dense. Its point is generally speaking of the experience, and also questioning the being a vessel for God and having everything come to you from God, and how there's a kind of maybe a martyrdom to that. She also speaks to a sort of masochistic aspect to seeking out God, because there is this like want for pain, or maybe a way of like not seeking out pain but dealing with pain that heightens the spiritual experience. Like she says, some of the lyrics are like, bruise me up, I'll eat all of my pride. And the point is like, know that I was made to divinize inside me. And it's like kind of being like filled up again with this divine power, even as you're going through this pain. And the pain is kind of part of the process. This song also has one of my favorite lines in the entire album, which is "Pray on my spine, it's a rosary." And that's because that's another part of the song where it's like evoking this sentiment that she, in and of herself, is an object of worship as she is surrendering to this higher power. And like through that objectification, she's kind of like allowing herself to be used, to be bruised, like again, like the masochism of it all. And then melody-wise, the way that the song is built up, it kind of feels like it's reaching for something, like it's incomplete. Because there's a string instrument in the background, I think a violin, and it goes, wait, I think I wrote it down. It goes G flat, D flat, C, A flat, C. And because of that final C, it kind of leaves like this openness, like this, we're like a reaching for something. Because if it was like ending on a, what was it, G flat? If it ended on G flat, there would be that sense of like completion, right? But with this C that it ends with at the end, it kind of feels like she's almost grasping for God. And this continues at the end of the song where the strings get kind of whiny at the end, kind of like a plea, and again, a plea assumedly for God. And the reason why it feels more like a yearning, because like with the C, it's open, but it's not as open as if it was D flat, right? So then it kind of feels like you're kind of almost, like there's an almost there. But not like, you know what I mean? Like with Reliquia, it was like kind of this openness, kind of this journey. And then here it's kind of this like, we're looking for something with that final C. Right after there's Porcelana. Porcelana continues the exploration of like the kind of objectification that she introduces in Divinize. But also kind of like a self-flagellation. Like she shouldn't have asked for everything she asked for in Divinize. Like she shouldn't have asked for so much of the divine power, if that makes sense. Or maybe it wasn't self-flagellation, more it was like critiquing herself, like wondering if it's a fair ask, if like she was a bad Christian or a bad devotee for asking everything she asked for in Divinize, for reaching at all. It goes with the general sentiment that I think from what I've heard and what I've experienced in the past when I was more like Christian, of like the guilt of only invoking God not because of your deep connection with him and like being consistent with it, but rather when you need him. But I think something that was really interesting is that in Porcelana, it's kind of confusing whether she is speaking to herself or whether she is speaking to the higher power as this sacred porcelain vessel, if that makes sense. I loved the flamenco mixed with classical outro. That was really cool at the end of the song. And also I love how like musically it kind of descends into ruin until it picks back up with like a choir that's kind of more like has again a little bit like a religious feeling to it, a like salvation feeling to it. And right after this holy sounding choir and violins, there's Mio Cristo Piange Diamanti. I'm sorry, I don't speak Italian. Is that what it is? Yeah, no, Mio Cristo Piange Diamanti, sorry. So it specifies that godliness that we hear at the end of Porcelana. And in the song, she kind of anthropopathizes God. To clarify, whereas anthropomorphing would be like, for example, like anthropomorphizing death would be like turning it into like a human being, like you know what I mean, like a sort of personification of it. Or like anthropomorphizing is when like, for example, we attribute human traits to like animals to make them more human kind of thing. And then anthropopathizing, she's doing that in kind of characterizing God as this feeling being, kind of the ability to like have these human emotions. So like in this song, he cries, he feels, he hurts, and maybe she anthropopathizes him to feel closer to him, like in the same way that we anthropomorph things, like so we can kind of understand them through the lens of how we experience life. And maybe it's easier for her to then understand him, herself, and all of humanity. Because in Porcelana, she kind of describes herself as like this polycotomous person. Like she is chaos, she is beauty, she's so many things. And then in Mio Cristo Piange Diamanti, with this emotion and this everythingness that she kind of ascribes to God, that polycotomy is being mirrored. So again, maybe it's a way for her to understand herself better by kind of having that parallel with God, or maybe understand God better by having that parallel with her. Or maybe it's like this other thing where because God is everything, God must be these things as well, like this feeling being, this hurting being, this chaos, this weakness, this beauty, and maybe that's how she embodies God, that's how she carries God with her, is by being polychotomous, by being and feeling strongly and deeply in the same way that she seems to believe God would. And this is made very clear in the next song, Berghain. Berghain is literally my shit. I fucking love Berghain, the song. Berghain is super clear because she, like, the starting verse is like, I'm so sorry, my German is gonna be awful. I've never spoken German before. It's like, seine Angst ist meine Angst, seine Liebe ist meine Liebe, seine Blut ist meine Blut. I'm so sorry, genuinely, to every German person that's ever lived. But it's basically saying his anger is my anger, his feeling is my feeling, like his love is my love, like kind of that is what she's communicating with this verse. And she also reflects on being a smaller part of a greater whole, maybe with respect to God, maybe with respect to the world, because she talks about being like a sugar cube that melts into her coffee. Like she says that se desaparecer, meaning that she knows how to like disappear into that coffee, like as a sugar cube. The orchestral arrangement of this song, delicious. Next song, La Perla. Now, I probably should have said this at the beginning, but I think it's most relevant for this song because I feel like I've heard this kind of analysis for this song the most. I think Rosalia would like probably corroborate to a good extent the things that I'm thinking that she is talking about thematically, because I've watched the interviews, because I've watched the other media around Lux, and so I think that everything that I've kind of pointed out is something that definitely exists with the album. However, when looking at this album and talking about it, a lot of people focus on what she's mentioned was her process, which was kind of ascribing or kind of taking a saint from the history of like religion and basing a song on said saint. I think that's an awesome way to like see the album. It just doesn't speak to me personally, even though I think it's really interesting and a very cool way to like make an album. That's not what I'm going to be talking about at all, because I like the more universal themes of like loving and feeling and being and like kind of having like a spiritual, whether it's Christian or Muslim or whatever, just genuine crisis between, you know, and not enlightenment, but like being emancipated from this world or wanting out of this world versus wanting deeply to be attached to the world. And so La Perla, even though I'm pretty sure it's related to a saint, I thought of it more as like the pearl of great price from the Bible, but interpreting it that way made it harder. So I came up with like two possible ways of seeing it. So one could be an allegory for God kind of needing you to give something up, like example, like your attachment to the world in order to be closer to him. Or what I think is more likely, because La Perla is basically talking about like this cheater who's like a renowned cheater and who has like the very stereotypical deeds that a cheater would have. I think that the better interpretation is like men or like earthly things are kind of bound in a way to deceive you. They're this false idol where they kind of make you believe that they're worth giving everything up for. Like she kind of basically says that like this man, this Perla, kind of steals from you, like fucks with you, all those things. So makes you believe that they're worth giving everything to, but like they're not the biblical pearl. They're not the thing that you're gonna give up everything for that should be God. I think the second interpretation is actually supported by the song right after, which is Mundo Nuevo, because in Mundo Nuevo she like is detaching herself from material things. Not even detaching, but like not relinquishing, kind of forsaking, like she's kind of like I want to burn everything down type of vibe. Particularly the things that have deceived her, and particularly the things that she deems were like, this was not worth it over God. It's this idea that she kind of like wants to leave the world into something more divine, into something more worth her time. So she wants to be like saved, emancipated. And I think musically what alluded to that were the trumpets. You know how like they say that in God's second coming you'll hear trumpets, like among other things, like one of the things like you'll hear trumpets. So it kind of like was giving a messianism type of vibe. And what I really loved about the song is the orchestral arrangement and the amazing vocal runs. The vocal runs in this song were genuinely crazy. And when I said that like in Mundo Nuevo it's this idea of like burning everything down, I don't think she specifically is as violent or is like, I'm gonna burn it down, but just like, I want rid of it. But in De Madruga, which is the song right after, it is like contextualizing Mundo Nuevo as in like, okay, to get to this new world, to get like emancipated, it is like violent, it is like bloody, it is like, I'm gonna burn it all down type of vibe. And this is obvious just by the title, like De Madruga, it's like at dawn, like right at dawn, which is kind of like a war battle thing. It's really like a revenge song, because again, the Perla, where it's like the things are deceiving her, and then it's the Mundo Nuevo, where it's like, I want something new, and it's like, okay, I'm taking revenge on everything that's deceived me to create this new world. But in the end, it doesn't really, none of it brings her closer to God. So in some way, it's kind of futile. I think a really interesting way that she made it clear that it's a kind of a battle song, because she speaks so many languages in this album. It's actually crazy. And this specific song is in Ukrainian. And what's going on in Ukraine right now? Exactly. It's not even her speaking, but her kind of adopting God's voice, like her trying to see things through God's eyes, like again with Mundo Nuevo and De Madruga, where it's like the realization that, you know, humans and the earth is corrupt and are sinful, etc., and are not made in the image that he had initially intended when he created the world, according to the Bible. And then De Madruga is like the apocalypse and God exercising his power to kind of reset things into making a more godly, faithful world. Why that would make Dios Es Un Stalker really interesting is because she's talking to God with such a loving manner. And then if the two previous songs were, you know, as God, it's like showing his destructive power and then immediately showing the love that she still has towards him, which I think is something that a lot of Christians kind of not necessarily wrestle with, but contend with as Christians, where it's like, you know, you're at the mercy of God, like he's powerful and can do a lot of things, but like you're also enraptured in God's love, which I've always found so fascinating, because to me, how are both those things true, where it's like there's this fear enlaced in it, but also this like love and sense of comfort? That to me is really fascinating. And I'm not even saying that it's not possible, I'm just wondering. La Yugular, which is like the jugular vein, this song talks about the complexity of feeling the depth of God's love, but then also feeling the weight of his absence. Because obviously, like, as much as you believe in anything in any religion, because again, I think that these themes like go much beyond Christianity, but just like the belief in divinity as a whole. But like when you're to subscribe to religion, it's hard to find something tangible, right? Like the tangibility is usually something kind of not ephemeral, but elusive, like, oh, I saw signs, or oh, I saw this, or this happened. But like there is always this kind of creeping sense of like, how can I hold on to this in a more material sense to like keep my faith alive, or feel the kind of ecstasy that people feel when their faith is like confirmed in some type of way, because it's hard for it to be materially confirmed. In the Yugular, I unfortunately did not write it down, and I probably should have, like the particular verses that specify this, but in the Yugular it suggests that Rosalia is the destructive force in De Madruga as opposed to God. And it also suggests that it wasn't necessarily all about revenge in De Madruga, but rather about trying to find truth in a deceptive world, or rather trying to put an end to the deceptive world or destroy it to then find the truth that exists beneath it, or to build truth out of the world once it's like tabula rasa. Is that how you pronounce that? Tabula rasa? You know what I mean? And truth would in the sense would be like some, like God, like would be like some iteration of God, like not just like truth, I'm finding God, but like truth in a sense that's rooted in godliness for her. And then there's a passage, this passage is in Arabic. I'm sorry, I read Arabic really slowly. It goes, min ajlik al-sama, min ajlik al-jahim, fala wa'uda wala wa'id. Yeah, and that's correct. Basically what it's saying is like destruction for the sake of God, or feeling more of God. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about like her finding the truth beneath the rubble of the world that she destroyed. There's also some of my favorite lyrics in this song where she does this form of poetry I learned that's from Spain, where it's like you talk about things that are contained in other things. Like I have to read it for it to make sense. It goes, yo ocupo en el mundo y el mundo cabe en mí, yo ocupo el mundo y el mundo me ocupa a mí. And that was like one of the very long, because there's also yo cuerpo en un haiku, and something about un pirámide, like there's so many different ones. And then after this yo cuerpo en el mundo, there's un continente no cabe en él, pero él cabe en mi pecho, y mi pecho ocupa su amor, y en su amor me quiero perder. And it's like, if you look at a continent, like it can't fit into him being God, but like he can still fit inside of me. All of me kind of occupies his love. I'm doing a really bad job because like I'm bad at direct translations. And in his love, I want to lose myself. So there's like, again, the entire kind of almost a rant that follows a style of poetry of like this big thing occupies this small thing and this small thing occupies this big thing. And I think that's really artistically interesting, metaphorically interesting, this idea that like God is so large, but like he can fit into my smallness, and like my smallness fits into like the depth and the largeness of his love, and I want to lose myself in that largeness. I think that's really fascinating. I don't think it just has to do with God. Like it's losing yourself to love, to feeling, to the world, to humanity, to the, like just the experience of being alive. There's so many fortes, there's so much strength in this song, not only in terms of the emotion it evokes, but like just musically. And then to contrast that, we have the song right after, which is Sauvignon Blanc, which is much more simple, which is much more stripped back. It's like literally just piano and vocals, and that's basically to communicate the idea of the song, which is stripping back, finding humility, not needing all these little ornaments. It's her describing how she's like willing to give up everything, willing to give up her Jimmy Choos, willing to give up like random bullshit, because she realizes that the only thing that matters is divinity, is God, and is her path to holiness. Another interesting thing that could connect La Yugular and Sauvignon Blanc is the wine, because obviously like Sauvignon Blanc is wine. There's this idea that like, again, God's love is something to be lost in, like it's intoxicating, like it's this thing that you kind of always seek. And then again with Sauvignon Blanc we have this imagery and this mention of wine. Also, something I found interesting is just generally through my own knowledge and understanding of like religions, or the history of like religions and spirituality, intoxication has, and I'm thinking particularly in indigenous communities, has been a way to get closer to God. Like sometimes like mushrooms and getting high in some form, sometimes drinking is, or even just like when you go to church, right, and you drink the blood of Christ, which is like kind of wine, and it's to get closer to a form of godliness, a form of divinity. And I think it's an intimate exchange between herself and God as she's having this conversation, telling, you know, God supposedly that she's gonna get rid of all these things. You're drinking wine and it's just you being yourself with someone like that. I feel is an intimate exchange. After this moment of humility, that was, again, remember, after all the rage she was expressing in Mundo Nuevo, de Madruga, and La Perla to some extent, as she was talking about like being deceived, we have forgiveness. After she's reconnected with God, after she's had her moment of revenge, she's like, you know what, I'm gonna reconnect with the world, because all I have to do is forgive. Like, yeah, there's trickery, yeah, there's wickedness, yeah, there's awful experiences, but my place isn't to judge all of that. My place is to forgive. What I really liked, because in some religions, this might start some shit, but in Christianity specifically, there is kind of like a condescendingness when it comes to forgiving, the sense of like loving the sinner, not the sin. But she comes with a different perspective of it, of like this deep empathy where it's like we feel the same, we're all of God, like, and for that reason, from this place of empathy, I forgive you. Not like I forgive you because I know that you're inherently evil and terrible because of the original sin, but because you're a human being, I'm a human being, you deserve forgiveness. And then some of my favorite lyrics also show up in this song. It says, Cuando el poder pesa más que el amor, which is like when power kind of overtakes weight-wise, like in weight, the power of love. And the second one is Cuando has querido más que Dios te ha querido dar, where it's like when you've wanted more than what God was willing to give you, which I think, those are such beautiful sentiments, genuinely. And this is what I'm saying, where it's like she's humanizing it. She's like, life kind of deals horrible cards, and we have all these stories, and we have all these flaws and these virtues. Like, I get it. Like, let me just witness you, and you witness me, and that's what we owe each other as human beings. There's particular lines at the end where it's like kind of like woven throughout a couple of lines, so I didn't put the entire quote, but the essence of what she's saying is that, like, to forgive, we have to see each other, we have to be kind to one another, and we have to hold warmth for each other as well. Then the penultimate song, Memoria, this is where like I can accept that I'm reaching, but I don't care because I think it's really cool. Right after La Rumba del Perdon, which was kind of like a folkloric style of storytelling. Like, again, it was like rooted in flamenco as a song, and just the way that it was going about lyrically, it felt like a kind of folklore type of storytelling of different people's lives. Right after that, we have Memoria, which is about remembrance. And like, again, like folklore is like a cultural means of remembrance. And then it also connects to Reliquia because every time she experiences something, she gives parts of herself. And in that way, those things will stay even after she's gone. So it's like being remembered in a sense. And then now after forgiving and loving the world, her time is up, right? And like death is in a way ultimate emancipation from the world, ultimate disconnection from the world, which again, at some point in this album, she did want. But now she's like, I don't want to be entirely severed, right? She kind of reconnects with her Reliquia self. She wants to feel and be felt for eternity, basically. And so it's about memory as in immortalization of feeling. I'm not going to be here, but like feeling and being felt is so important to me. So like do so through the memory of me. Like, please don't forget me, because then I'm dead, but like it's not done yet, because if you remember me, then like all those, you know, all that feelingness, all that humanity is still there. One of my favorite lyrics ever. I wrote it in English because I thought it'd be easier to like convey than just translating it. And it says, when I remember the past, it always changes me a bit, and whatever I recall is always true in my mind. And if my soul overflows and the absence of the past is oblivion, when I die, I only ask to remember what I've lived. Like, oh my God. I think it's such an interesting thing to say too, because, you know, it's the recognition that even though she, again, wants to have this semblance of connection to the world, that semblance of connection is flawed, because inherently there's no way for her to be remembered as she fully was. I guess she's kind of saying that she's okay with that, maybe, or maybe she's just speaking to like the nature of remembrance in a way. And also, I misspoke. In Memoria, she's not dying, but like it's a penultimate song, and the song after that is Magnolias, where she is dying. Memoria is her like, it's almost like an old person who, which is such a sad sentiment, truly. Like, I've been seeing this a lot lately, and it's like making me sad, where an old person, as they, you know, are getting closer to death's door, like, no offense, they start to lose their memory. And she's like, but wait, this is such an important part of my beingness, my continuing to exist. Like, I don't want to lose these memories, even if it means that, like, you know, they're flawed or whatever. Like, I don't want to lose this. And then right after this, Magnolia, where she is dying. In the song, basically, like, she very obviously has reconciled the tension between, or not reconciled, but explored as much as she can, because I don't know if you could ever reconcile it, the tension between God and the world. And she kind of says this with like a meeting God halfway. She specifically says in the song, like, I'll go halfway. She says particularly that she's like finally between them both, which I think is interesting, because between them both isn't really a place, right? Like, it's like there's earth and there's like God, which is like you'd assume is like heaven. Like, those are two distinct places. And she's like, I'm in between. Like, where is that? Like, is that in space? Like where are you? And I think that's the point, where it leaves an ambiguity, where she's like, I'm going to sit in this ambiguity, maybe, in this like everythingness, in this experience of being alive, which probably, like, I guess requires an ambiguity. And here it is, obviously, because she's dying, the theme of grievance. And it made me wonder if the theme of grievance isn't even just unique to this song, but the entire album, in the sense that she's like grieving the world and grieving for the world. You know what I mean? Like, there's like the 5 stages of acceptance, and like Magnolia is acceptance. Like, there's bargaining. Oh, wait, there's any levels to this shit. Like, I'm realizing this now. Okay, there's denial, anger, bargaining, again, bargaining with the yearning and stuff, anger with the like war and stuff, depression, and acceptance. Now, depression and denial are not things I've particularly talked about, but like, I'm sure it's something that you can find in the album. And like, what and how it's being grieved, I don't know, like, maybe like kind of grieving the moment in the garden, right, with Adam and Eve. Because if you see it in this way, like, if you see it through the lens of grievance, like, you can see Sexo Violencia y Llantas, it would be through the lens of like that initial severance when Eve bit the apple, and then, like, you know, there was like that clearer, starker separation between God and man, now that we became sinful. Because again, some scholars believe that the Garden of Eden was in heaven. I feel like in all beliefs of like where the Garden of Eden was. It was like closer to God than we are right now. So maybe she's like grieving that moment, or the grief is a reflection of that moment. But at the very least, that moment like can easily be harked back to when we talk about like this, at least in a Christian sense. Or I don't know if other religions also have the same theme. I would actually love to know that, if you'd like to comment that, if you're of another religion, it's just like the original sin moment. But yeah, where it's like harking back to when this separation between earth and God was first something that we had to contend with because of the original sin in the Garden of Eden. And now, even though she's dead, we, like, by the end of the song, we still know that she's not really dead, because she lived life so fully and left part of herself. So she's kind of immortalized into like this like, in some ways, I guess she did get emancipated, and like, you know what I mean? Like, I guess she did in some way get the emancipation that she initially wanted, where it's like, you're dead, which is like ultimate emancipation. And then also like you've kind of ascended into this like entire feelingness and entire beingness, where you're kind of been left behind in those experiences that she mentioned in Reliquia, maybe. So to recap this journey, which is essentially the conclusion of the part delving in specifically the album, we had, and I'm going to read what I wrote down, we had her questioning being between them both, which eventually was in Magnolias. She first loved the world, Reliquia, right? Then she loved God, Yugular, Sauvignon Blanc, etc. Then she returns to religion, because in Magnolias there's the mention of like stardust, like pigeons, saints, sparkles, that kind of vibe of like she's going back to like some form of divinity, you know. And then she extends grace to humans and found balance between wanting more of God and settling into the world. So like after questioning if she could be between them both, she eventually, again, like I said in the beginning, was between them both. So interviews and visuals is kind of shorter in terms of my thoughts and how it weaves into it, but I still think it's important because I think it speaks to just, again, how genius this album is. So like when it came to her interviews, she has this deep commitment to understanding the other. And when I mean the other, I mean it in the philosophical sense, where like philosophers talk about just the general connecting to like something like other than the subject, like this like selfhood, you know what I mean? And to just like understanding the world fully. Like, I mean, the fact that she had, I think, 13 languages in this album, the fact that she like read so much, the fact that she researched so much, right? And then the way that she kind of approached this album with like, I want imperfections, I want a deep humanness. Like, she recorded it with the orchestra, right? She didn't really want it to have like an AI flavor to it, like a robotic flavor to it. She wanted it to feel deeply human because it's talking about deep humanity, right? It makes sense. And in an era where like that kind of intention is becoming more and more important, because there's so much access to AI and tech bullshit that a lot more slop is being made, I think it's a breath of fresh air. And I think this album is going to be important and relevant for a long time. Not in the media cycle sense of like everyone's going to be talking about Lux forever, but just in like capturing humanness. Because humanness and capturing it is becoming like questions that are arising more and more in this world of AI and deep fakes and etc. And then yeah, the other thing about the interviews that was really interesting to see is like the greats who informed her, and not even just in the interviews, but in the merch that I received as part of going to the concert. There comes like a little booklet where it gives more insight on the lyrics and the process behind the songs. And in it, there were quotes from the Bible, which was really interesting, but also quotes from like different philosophers that inspired particular parts of her song. Like Simone Weil was, I don't think it's pronounced that way, Simone Weil was one of those people. There was something Borges, I forget his name, I'm so sorry. And then just so many people, right? And I think to make this kind of body of work, to approach life with intention, you do need like a depth of knowledge and understanding of the world, which requires like human to human connection, right? Just speaking to people, but also being very well read, or very well cultured, which again like speaks to the culture of the album, where it's like, I want to speak to something universal. I want to speak to how connected I love to be with the world. So to do that, you need to actually connect. I feel like I'm being a bit redundant, but I feel like it also makes sense. And yeah, she was against rushing it too. Like, I remember in one interview she mentioned how she spent a full year on a song, which is insane. And just writing and rewriting and going back to the drawing room and reading more. It's a beast of an album in a good way. And then the visuals, I'm also gonna show them from the magazine that I mentioned I got from merch. One second. The visual for me, like, I explained it partially, I think, in my media favorites video, and I do not recall how I explained it, but maybe I'll write a little bit of text on the screen to elaborate. But essentially, it spoke to art being kind of this itch, or being like the scratching. No, like, it's in between being an itch and being the scratching of an itch. And I'm not sure how to elaborate on that right now, but I know that once I edit this video, I'll be able to write it out in a way that makes more sense. So I'm just gonna hope to that. Or maybe I'm just not gonna explain it. We'll see. And the reason why I think that her visuals allude to that is because she kind of portrays these existential moments being weaved into the mundane, kind of as a way to explore or communicate the in-betweenness and the ambiguity when it comes to God and the world that she talks about in Lux, and it being so well expressed through these photographs, through the costuming, through her expressions in the photos. Like, there aren't really probably like words, like direct words to describe this feeling apart, like, as well as I think the pictures that we see in the Lux stuff. Like, these are like, it's almost like weird, like, it's almost not uncanny valley, but it's almost like odd. Like, she's like in this field of grass and she's just like in this like nun outfit, and at first, like, you don't get it. By the second look, you're like, okay, I kind of get it, where it's like, she kind of looks crazy in this, but like, I think that's the point, right? It's like kind of speaking to maybe like the uniquely private and maybe isolating experience of like spiritual, not psychosis, but like kind of figuring out your place in relation to spirituality, and not only spirituality, but just like this love of the world. Because that's another thing that's really crucial to this album, is like, even though I talk a lot about it, you know, connecting to God, like I said at some point, she characterizes God also as feelingness and beingness. So I think that for me, the way that I took it as someone who's not particularly like subscribing to the idea of like Christian or biblical God, is like seeing godliness, holiness, spirituality as this expression of like everythingness, like a source, you know what I mean? Like an everythingness, like an all-encompassingness, like the energy or the thing that reflects all the love, the hate, the questioning, the obsession, the depravity, the beauty, the sanctity, the everything that exists within the world, and connecting to it. So, like, feeling that, like, you know what I mean? Like, this is very, very much giving, like, you're outside randomly and then you're having, like, an existential crisis. You know what I mean? I feel like that's something I can deeply relate to as someone who has an hyperactive brain, as you can probably tell by watching this video. Like, you know what I mean? Like, look at this. Like, what the fuck is she doing? Like, she's in her nun outfit, right? She's just sitting on, this isn't even a bench. What is this? She's sitting on, like, a pipe outside, and there's a fucking, like, I think that's a Toyota. There's a fucking Toyota in the back. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the grandiosity of this album, and the religiosity of this album, and the budget, and she's fucking posing in front of a Toyota. Like, this is genius. Because there is a tendency to think that, like, oh, these deep and grand existential themes come with, like, all these adornments, like, you know what I mean? Like, more of a photo shoot type of abstract, maybe staging for the photography. But, like, this is just speaking more to the humanness by being so mundane and kind of out of place. Or it's just, like, this is just what we go through as humans. These crises, these questions, these feelings. I think it's really interesting as well because, like, in a lot of these pictures, she's dressed in white or something really, really simple, which maybe has to do with, like, Sauvignon Blanc and, again, like, relinquishing adornments. But also, I feel like has to do with, like, the idea of, again, absorbing the world, where, like, she's kind of, like, everything else is, like, colorful and, like, shit's happening, and she's just, like, in white, like, kind of, like, barely wearing anything of consequence, and is just, like, kind of trying to absorb it. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying? For people who are deeply feeling and deep feelers, I think, like, this best is just trying to describe what I mean when I'm saying that she's trying to, like, kind of absorb the world. Like, this is a mundane scene, right? People are, I think this isn't even a beach. I think it's a parking lot. It's a parking lot in front of like a shitty beach. And she's just like on the floor in her white dress. And to me, it's giving very much like deep feeler. You know what I mean? Like you're in this like moment that's kind of seems of no consequence, but you're ascribing so much meaning and depth and feeling to it, which I think is what this album is talking about. Like she kind of critically analyzes or thinks critically about what it means for her to be a human being in this world. So those are my very brief thoughts. Sorry, I just had a little comments here and there. Nothing too crazy. This video is gonna be so long. Like in all seriousness, this video is gonna be so long. And I barely drank from my tea because I had so much adrenaline just from, I guess, the love of the game, and the game being talking about this album, that it, I guess, cured my crippling period cramps, which is awesome. So yeah, that's it. I have no idea how to end this video, bro. Like, I'm like, just bye.